Welcome to Modern Musings, conversations with the maiden, mother, and crone, where we look at ourselves and the world through the lens of the 21st century. Hello, and welcome back to Modern Musings. I'm your hostess, Cindy Murray, and I am here again with Kristen and Amber.
Hello.
Hello.
And we're talking about one of our, I think I say this, or we all say this all the time.
One of our favorite.
One of our favorite subjects to talk about. Yes, we do that all the time. But one of our kind of favorite things is, no, I'm not talking about One Little Word or December Daily. I'm talking about metaphysical practices. Now, what is metaphysics? Metaphysics is any kind of, some people will call it a pseudoscience, but it's basically any kind of theoretical science that cannot be proven. It has not been proven. Let me correct it. That it has not been proven. Maybe that's because it hasn't been studied, sufficiently, or that they haven't found the right way to study it, or maybe the studies that have been done have been inconclusive. Mm-hmm. So, and there's a lot of different, the metaphysical is used as a huge umbrella of things that fall under it. And so that's kind of what we want to talk about today, is what kinds of things generally fall under that, and what our different individual thoughts, interests, what we're interested in, and where those things lie. So I'm going to start off by just naming a list of some of these topics, and then we can pick up from there after I name them and just kind of go through each one. So the categories that I got this list from the Google AI. I have
right.
I have mixed feelings about Google, I have mixed feelings about Google, and I have mixed feelings about AI. I do love Google. It's a great search engine. But
the AI interface is concerning because
yes.
you don't know how valid the information
and I've
is,
also learned that, because Google has become so much more commercial, certain things are given more weight in the searches. So you have to take everything that you search for on Google with a grain of salt.
So the AI right now, the algorithms are, if you ask it, what is a banana? It's going to give you the information that it finds from websites that have higher traffic than other websites.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So
if a website gets trafficked the most by users all over the world, and it says a banana is a flower that's purple,
then it's going to give you that as an answer.
Yeah.
So you have to take everything that comes with this as
just
with a
like
grain of
metaphysics.
Salt. Yes. Okay. So so here are the categories. We have mindfulness and meditation, spiritual practices, energy work, divination, psychic development, altered states of consciousness practices, and healing practices. And I think we've probably talked about all of these at one point in time or another on the podcast. So, as I mentioned, I did this as a Google search, and I will correct myself. I did not search for metaphysical categories of metaphysics. I searched for, because when I did that, I got a listing of a very different listing. Amber, you have it pulled up right now, right? What you just had?
Yeah, I Googled categories of metaphysics and I got ontology, theology, cosmology.
So those are some other metaphysical sciences. They are metaphysics, but they're metaphysics, not metaphysical. So,
gotcha.
So we're talking.
It's all in the wording.
It's English teacher,
Latin.
So metaphysics is broad categories of physics, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why you have cosmology.
Yes,
but metaphysical is above the breakdown of that, the etymology of that word, I believe stands for broad categories of things that are above, beyond, and outside the scope of physical laws of
right.
science.
So like healing practices, when you talk about healing practices like Reiki,
we're not talking about
it cannot be defined by physics as we know it in a medical sense. Like we know that, I can heal your bone by repositioning your bone
and letting it fuse together. Right.
Doing medical practices that are in the physical laws of science.
Right.
Right. So metaphysics is the things that are not, like you said earlier, pseudoscience. Those are things that still fall under that.
I Googled what you Googled, and I got the exact same thing. Ontology.
No. Because what I Googled...
She did 2 different Googles.
I did two different Googles.
No, you didn't. I haven't said what I Googled yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I actually Googled was, after I found that odd thing, which kind of surprised me, was that I changed my wording to say categories of metaphysical practices. So it's not studies, it's practices. So, and that's where I came up with these 7 categories. And I just want to start with the list. Let's go down. Mindfulness and meditation. This one is very common. A lot of people believe in this one. It does not, and let me state also that none of these, as they are listed, have anything that is counter to any Judeo-Christian or other religious beliefs, okay? Just as a broad category. Now, if you get into very specific studies within those categories, sometimes they do. Mm-hmm. But in this instance, we're talking about mindfulness and meditation. So this can show up as just being aware of being in the moment, of creating focus. Sometimes there are breath work and mental techniques. These are things that are taught to people about, who are dealing with panic attacks and anxiety.
Yeah.
All kinds of things like this. Medical doctors often prescribe, not prescribe, but proscribe these types of activities in order to help people with their mental awareness and their mental stability. These are also the same practices that go into yoga, which is just a physical movement along with breath work and mindfulness. Meditation, I've been a practitioner of meditation for several years now. It's very helpful to me in keeping me centered and grounded and not spinning out of control when things are not going my way. So, what are y'all's thoughts about mindfulness and meditation? I mean, we talk about mindfulness and meditation a lot on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we actually just did an episode last week on meditation.
Yes.
So, I mean, to start off with that one, I feel like that one is actually surprising that it's still considered, just metaphysical, and it's becoming more part of our centuries medicine, but it's been a part of Eastern medicine forever.
For centuries.
Yeah. And it's, to me, it's interesting because we don't have a way to measure exactly what's going on in the brain, except with some of our really wonderful machinery that we have in medical science now.
Right. Brain waves that measure brain waves. Yeah. But they don't tell you what those brain waves are doing.
We're still learning all of that. So I foresee, meditation, and it's interesting that they put mindfulness in that category, because I think of them as together but also separate. Because meditation is, to me, like a verb. Well, they're both verbs, but it's something that you do like an activity, whereas like mindfulness is a state of mind that you try to achieve, like continuously throughout the day. Whereas you like pause and meditate, whereas mindfulness is something that you want to achieve.
But
like
mindfulness
breathing.
is a pause. It's pausing to be mindful of what you're doing in the moment.
Right, but it's something that you want to try to do like 24/7, right? If you meditated 24/7, you probably have to get up to go to the bathroom at some point. Is what I'm saying. They're similar, but
they are related. Yes.
Right. So, but what I was saying though is that I believe that we just haven't quantified enough data, or we just don't have the right machines. Like our machines are still just too new,
right,
to really validate it. And I believe that in the future, we will be able to say that mindfulness and meditation is a true physical science.
Right. I think it's closer than you think it is, because I don't believe that we have to have machines that can read our minds to quantify effects of meditation, because they already know.
I'm just talking like the laws of science,
right?
Like
it probably would already be there, except for like the drug companies, honestly.
And that's the thing, is that the meditation, they can already quantify the effects of meditation on the physical body, because it is proven that people who meditate have less stress, less anxiety or whatever. It can lower the body's heart rate. It can improve your breathing. It can relax your muscles.
That at all.
So those are scientifically provable reactions to the process of meditating. So I believe, and I think Amber's absolutely correct here, that it is the drug companies that kind of hold that thing back a little bit, because the pharmaceutical companies can't make money off of meditation.
And drugs and medication is pushed first and foremost. I think in my years of going to doctors, I've only had a couple of doctors that have suggested, like for my migraines, that I think I had one doctor ever suggest that I should get massages regularly for my migraines over medication.
Well, and I think that's I think that's the difference in a previous episode that we talked about, MDs versus DOs.
Right.
Because the medical doctors, MDs, and don't get me wrong the way I'm wording this, as if you go back and listen to that episode, a DO is also a doctor. They are equally qualified to treat your medical conditions, but they go to a different kind of school and are indoctrinated into a different,
literally,
into doctrine, not indoctored, but indoctrinated into a different theology, or for lack of, or better word, or a different theory of practices. And so that's where DOs are often more holistic.
Right. Well, and that's why I think a lot of it's that Eastern and Western medical practices.
Well, and MDs are taught in school that medication and surgery and sometimes physical therapy are the three main ways to treat illness and injury, whereas DOs have lots of different sources, a lot of
They're
different...
adding mindset to one of the ways
and
heal the body.
Yes. Yeah. And so I find that if you go to a DO, they will often prescribe things like meditation and mindfulness, even for things like weight loss. I mean, if you go to a weight loss counselor, one of the things they teach you first and foremost is don't eat mindlessly. You don't sit in front of the TV and eat. When you sit down to eat, you need to be mindful of every bite that you put in your mouth. Enjoy it, chew it fully, slow down, all those things. And that is an aspect of mindfulness. And so I think those I think as we incorporate more of those things into our lives every day, that part of metaphysical practices will become more acceptable, it's very acceptable. This is a very common thing. Lots of people do it. This is not some
nowadays
secret thing.
It's definitely more accepted than it has been in the past.
Oh yes. And people aren't afraid to say, I meditate,
right.
or whatever. So,
right.
so I think it will just become mainstream, basically.
Yes.
I think it's already on the verge of being mainstream, because when you stop and talk about yoga, most of the gyms that you might have a subscription or a membership to, they almost always offer some form of yoga. And so in that, already right there, you're into that. And that's, it's just very, very well accepted in our modern society. So it's why it is still classified as a metaphysical science, I don't know. Next up is spiritual practices. And this is another one that confuses a lot of people because they think there's confusion between religion and spirituality, and there are people who are very narrowed in their views of what is spiritual practice. So I don't want to step on anyone's toes in their religious beliefs. We've talked about some of my religious beliefs in the past on this podcast. I don't believe that spiritual practices in any way step on the toes of any religion, because every religion is based on spiritual practices.
Well, yeah, and religions have spiritual practices ingrained in them.
Right. So this is the AI's definition of spiritual practices: prayer, rituals, chanting, connecting with a higher power or spiritual guides. So that, if you look at the Catholic Church, we'll take that one as an instance. Prayer, absolutely. Rituals, they have rituals through Mass, through
lighting candles,
all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. Yes. Chanting, we have Gregorian chants and sometimes the priest will chant and the congregation will chant back. You have connecting with a higher power, that would be God, Jesus, whatever. And then spiritual guides in the the Catholic Church, those would be the saints. Mm-hmm. So right there is a foundation for spiritual practices that is not contrary to Catholic spiritual beliefs. So, and I believe, and often this one is hard because there are people who believe that spiritual beliefs must be tied to a religion, and then but really it does not. You can have spiritual beliefs in the absence of a religion. And so even someone who is an atheist can have spiritual beliefs, because spiritual is from the inside. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so even someone who believes that there is no God can still have spiritual beliefs,
because that's what they believe.
That's what they
honestly
believe.
What I see the difference between the two is spiritual beliefs is what you believe on the inside, and religion is what others tell you.
Those are the practices,
believe, the doctrine.
Right. Spiritual beliefs are what you feel on the inside, the things that you believe, mm-hmm. whereas religion is the practices that you put into play. Does that make sense? So religion is the rituals, the chanting, those sorts of things that help you express
your spiritual
practice. Yes. Yeah. So there's that one. And like I say, I don't think that spiritual, I don't know how you could ever prove, again, I don't know what the proof could be, but they have done medical studies where they've shown that people who have a religion or a well-established spiritual practice often have better outcomes in things like recovering from serious disease like cancer and things like that.
Or even like alcoholism and things like
Absolutely. So, yeah.
Well, there's a sense of community in that as well, especially if you're in a religion, an organized religion.
Yes, and that helps as well. Absolutely.
Versus doing it alone. Yeah.
Like a AA is a religious based.
Absolutely.
And so
yes.
AA helps a lot of people out of alcoholism. And so the sense of community, if you have people there, especially if you don't have family, if you have people there helping you, then you're most likely to come out of a situation such as that.
And in order to be successful in that particular program, you have to accept their spiritual beliefs, if that makes sense, that there is a higher power or whatever, that is part of their program. So that's, but it has helped, how many people, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people recover from alcoholism and things like that. So, so I really think, and like I said, even with like hospice, very often hospice is funded by and is supported by religious groups, and that they've shown that helps terminally ill people cope with, and their families cope with, the imminent passing of that individual that they would not get otherwise. And it's all based on those spiritual beliefs. So the next one is energy work. And this one is a little bit less common in Western civilization than it is in Eastern civilization.
But it's being spoken, and I don't think people realize what they're saying.
Right.
When they say good vibes only, or
yes. So energy work is practices that aim to manipulate or balance vital energy within the body, including Reiki, Qigong. Is that how you say that? I don't know that much about Qi. And chakra balancing. Is it? Well,
I thought it was Chi.
Chi is CHI, right?
Yeah.
This would be QI.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Ki. Yes, Ki. And chakra balancing. So the chakras, Kristen, would you like to explain what the chakras are for people who are uninitiated?
Yeah. So in a sense of
Eastern culture.
It's Eastern culture. And I'm just going to give it in layman's terms, whether Eastern or Western. So your physical body, when we dissect it, you have heart, lungs, liver,
right,
feet and toes, and armpits, right? But in your chakras, you have 7 chakras, and there are actually, as I've been reading more and more, there's more beyond these ones that I'm just going to talk about. The main ones. I'm not even going to mention the other ones. Mm-hmm. But in the main ones, you have 7, and they are in kind of like hot points in your body, if you would say, that are a centralized area where the organs or other things related to that, how they impact your well-being.
Right.
So, and how your body responds or reacts to things like trauma, distress, happiness, things like that.
Yes.
So, basically, in layman's terms, that if you have a disadvantage to be able to speak your mind, then your throat chakra might be blocked. Or your throat chakra might be blocked and it gives you a disadvantage to speak your mind. So it's a push and pull type of thing. So the external environment impacts it internally and vice versa.
Right.
So experiences that you have in your life may impact your chakra in like your lower section. That is where you have your feeling of safety and security, like a child does.
This is your root chakra.
Your root chakra. And so that is where you feel safe and secure, like you do as a child when you're clinging to your mom's hip and you're in the best place in the world. But when you grow up and you get to a place in your life where you don't feel secure, you don't feel like you're at home or where you belong, then you may have a blockage there. And it can cause things like gut problems, for example, or, like the one in your throat, you might have, a cold or a sore throat, or even thyroid problems for some. So it just depends on the area that's impacted. So there's different places, kind of like if you think about, what is that? Not acupuncture, but acupressure, right? So they say like on different places on your hand, yes. There's trigger points. You can squeeze those. Like there's one in my
In fact, I believe that acupressure and acupuncture are forms of energy work.
Probably part of that, yeah. Yes. So, and the healing one as well. I think they kind of blend into each other. These are all kind of like little rainbows of categories of study, right? Because they kind of blend into each other.
Right.
But, like the one in your hand, there's a pressure point that you can squeeze when you feel stressed out, and it can also help reduce headache pain. So chakras, definitely something to read about if you're interested in that. So much information on the internet now. I remember when I first started reading about it, there wasn't a lot of information on the internet. You had to go to the library and read a book about it.
You had to go buy a physical book.
Yeah, an actual
you had to
book.
But there's open a book.
So much information. There's a lot of wonderful YouTube videos that break them down, and they're all different colors. So they also have some color symbolism that you can use to kind of bring about the blockages, or reduce the blockages or strengthen those areas.
So one of the interesting things that I have read, I never was a huge fan of chakra based energy work or anything like that, but I read this interesting book that a friend of mine gave me to read called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Miss, PhD. And what she does is she takes the chakras and she breaks down like the organs that are involved in it. She talks about mental and emotional issues and physical dysfunctions that go with it. But then she also breaks it down and compares them to the different sacraments of different religious organizations, which I thought was really fascinating. So the first chakra, which we call the root chakra, is that very basic need for human safety, meeting the human's basic needs. Food, shelter, the mentality of a baby is all about eating, pooping, and sleeping and being safe, right? Mm-hmm. And in that, when you look at like the sacraments of religion, particularly like the Catholic faith, we're talking about the sacrament of baptism. So they baptize babies. This is the part of that system that is based on that basic thing. We're protecting that child eternally, right? And you can also look at the Sephira, and you can look at Gaia, creation, all of those things go with that. And then you look at the second chakra, which is the sacrum, Correct. And that comes with communion. And if you look at the Sephira, that's Yesod, and foundation. And so, and they go through all of these different sacraments and different religious things, and they wind up at the 7th chakra, which is your crown chakra, correct?
Yes.
And that is your sense of oneness with all creation. Your transcendence, your higher love. And some people, they would say, that's when you transcend beyond the human body. That would be eternal life in, Judeo-Christian beliefs or whatever. And the sacrament there would be extreme unction. And so there's like all of these different stages that the chakras go through, starting at the root, which is at the base of your tailbone, the base of your spine, and going up through your body. And each of those areas represent different aspects, not only of your body, but of your emotional well-being. So that root, you cannot be whole everywhere in your body
if you're unsafe.
And we've talked about that before, too. We have
talked about that, because you cannot be creative if you're in danger.
Yes.
I mean, there is an element of, creativity and, survivalism, but that's exactly what it is if you're in danger because you're at risk of not surviving, you're going to be creative so that you can survive. You're not going to be creative to fulfill a desire to make the world beautiful. You're going to be creative to have shelter or food.
Right.
And that's kind of like that hierarchy of, we were talking about that one time of like human needs too.
Right.
There's like a pyramid, and spirituality is one of the last ones on there, because being able to, it's not the very last, but one of the last ones is giving back to the community.
Right.
Because if you are homeless, because this is actually like human basic needs, talking about people who are homeless, they need those human basic needs. Once they've fulfilled those, then they can work on the next ones, which are having a job, friends, things like that. They can have the ability to have peace of mind so that they can focus on those things. You can't focus on friendships if you can't even think straight because you haven't eaten in days.
Right. Right.
So, same thing with giving back to the community. If you can't put food on your own plate, then you really can't give back to the community.
Exactly.
I'm like, how can you help others when you can't help yourself?
Exactly.
Yes. And so all of these chakras, if you look at them in that way, they progress through the human development, not only through the body, but through your ability to care for yourself and to give back and all those things.
Right.
So,
and that's just one of the beliefs in energy work.
Right. There's a
practice.
lot
There's
of
so
different
many.
ones. So
we could do a whole episode on that.
Well, and there's, I remember my sister-in-law years ago when she decided to quit smoking. She went, no, I'm sorry. It was when she was trying to lose weight. She went and had her ear stapled. That's another form of energy work. They're using that.
My grandma took me to get my ear stapled when I was a kid.
Yeah, and that's exactly what that is. You're using that trigger point.
Only if you believe it. It doesn't work if you don't believe it.
If you don't believe it,
I was a kid, so I didn't believe it, so it didn't work.
So there's that, and there's a lot of like I said, Reiki. Kristen and I are both level 1 Reiki. So we've taken the class to learn how to apply Reiki
to ourselves, because you can't give your energy to other people,
right? And so we use our. I don't know how much you practice. I don't practice. I do
it on my back a lot.
Do you?
Rubbing my hands together,
I forget. I do sometimes do it on my feet.
I do it on my eyes a lot too when things get really overwhelming. Because I don't even if you don't believe in Reiki, let me tell you, just rub your hands together.
Rub your hands together. They're hot.
They get a little warm, and then you just place them over your eyes.
And you can feel that radiation.
It is so relaxing just to do that for 1 minute.
And so I do that with my feet because I have arthritis in my toes and they hurt really bad. And sometimes I get in bed and all of a sudden, because I'm not on my feet, they start to throb and hurt. And I'll just do that on my feet and it helps a lot. So, and this is why it is considered a pseudoscience and metaphysics, because they can't prove why it works. They don't know why it works. They don't have
the scientific tools to measure
why this works.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's what it is. Okay. Now I'm going to get into one that is, this one, we're right in the middle of the list of 7. This one is a hot topic, and this is probably the only one that raises a lot. It raises a lot of disbelief, and it raises a lot of hackles because a lot of religious people think some very wide beliefs about this, and often negative beliefs. It has a lot of negative connotations, but that is divination.
I knew exactly what you were going to say.
And so divination is using tools like tarot cards, astrology, runes, or numerology to gain insight into future events or personal situations. So it doesn't have to be necessarily telling the future. Mm-hmm. It can be talking about using these things to guide you internally on how to behave. So
or not even how to behave, but how you think or feel
about something. So it's kind of like in a lot of people, it's tapping into your own intuition. So you read the card or whatever, and that card triggers a response in your brain that tells you, maybe it triggers a memory or something, and you go, oh, I kind of do that. I think about that or whatever. That could be affecting me.
Well, when I read people's cards, I usually preface it with, like, you're on a path. And so whatever the cards say right now is where you are right now, that it's not a prediction of the future. It's like it's where you are on this path right now. You could wake up tomorrow and stub your toe and be on a completely different path.
Right. Well, and
it's like the butterfly effect.
I really think it is, because it's based on whatever that card is based on your thoughts, your feelings, your situation in the moment, whatever it triggers in your own brain. So if you say there's you've met someone that's important to you, their brain is the one that goes to who that person is.
Could possibly be.
Right. And it's not, you're not telling them anything. Their brain is the one that's telling them that. Does that make sense? That's where I think there's a lot of people get uptight about it, because there are some religions that say, suffer not the witch to live or whatever, and that telling fortunes is quote unquote evil. I don't think, though, that those same people have taken into consideration that there are a large number of people that they call prophets who have done the exact same thing, who woke up from a dream and said, this is what this dream means.
Right.
Who have proselytized, preached based on some sort of divination. So who's to say that
who's proper and who's not?
Right. I don't think it's for anybody to decide except for the person who is receiving that information. Right? Mm-hmm. And so so there's where we are with that. And what method those people use, there's tons of different ways to do that. But I believe that all of it, the person who is reading the cards, the person who is telling your fortune, reading your palm, whatever. They are just an interpreter for what's in your head. Those things are already in your head. Does that make sense?
Well, there's a level of psychology that has to do with it. Mm-hmm. As somebody that is studying to become a psychologist, when you read the cards or palms or anything really, you read the person that you are reading for.
Right.
Not just the cards.
Not just the cards, but also I think that psychology comes into effect with the person you're reading for also.
You know what's really interesting too is that ink blot test is not much different than that either.
Because it's like what you see
Rorschach.
in the ink blot.
The Rorschach, thank you. Yes, when
because
you see
that's what the cards are exactly.
Your brain gives a response, and then it's analyzed. That's really all that, to me, that tarot reading is.
Yeah, in psychology, we give tests such as the ink blot test or the thematic apperception test to judge people's thoughts and feelings on certain things. So if you see certain things in the ink blot, it means one thing, or if you don't see anything at all, it means another thing.
Right. And so it's really no different than someone interpreting those cards, because the cards are full of symbology, often religious symbols, and how that person interprets those symbols and where they fall in that reading it informs the reader and the recipient of what that potential, and you notice I say potential reading or meaning is. And it really is up to the person who is receiving the reading, whether they're giving the reading to themselves, or reading
someone
the card,
is helping
or
them
someone is helping them by interpreting those symbols. So I think these are, like you said, these are known tests, but I will stop right there and tell you that many medical doctors feel like psychology and psychiatry
is a
pseudoscience because you can't prove what people think.
Yeah.
You can't prove what's going on in their head.
We don't have a way to measure it.
Well, when you get your doctorate, it's a doctorate of philosophy.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, really?
So, yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
Because I've been researching post-grad school.
A psychiatrist is a medical doctor but they really focus more on prescribing than the therapy. So
and welcome Western medicine.
Right.
Literally
medicine. Back to that Western medicine thing.
Yeah, medicine and paperwork.
Right. So, but when you're talking about like numerology, here's another one that people are like numerology, but the Enneagram,
totally,
the Myers-Briggs,
totally.
Yeah, all of those are also psychological tests, medical tests. Psychological
tests, but they fall into that psychological thing. So that's why it's considered a pseudoscience. And because those are predicting behaviors and predicting emotional outcomes, they are part of this divination sector.
So, with divination, one of the key things to remember is that divination is using a tool.
A tool,
okay?
Any tool.
So, there's another section after this that we're going to get to psychic development, okay?
That's different.
So, remember that it's in its own section. So, when you think about you're going to use a tool to divine something, okay?
Yes.
One that you haven't mentioned yet that has nothing to do with telling the future or anything. And there's so many methods. You can use like a crystal ball. You can use a pendulum, right?
Yes,
lots of other
ways.
things we haven't talked about. One of them is dowsing rods, which is a form of divination. So dowsing rods are really interesting
funny. I was
because
thinking that.
These have been used for a very long time to locate water and minerals.
And oil.
Yeah.
They used to use...
Yeah.
That's how they would find oil, where to drill.
Yeah.
Where to drill for an oil well or a water well.
These copper rods, and you're walking with these copper rods in your hands that are kind of bent, and so they're like loose in your hands. And as you get closer to water or the mineral source that you're trying to reach, the rods get closer and closer together. And as you get further and further away, it works a lot like a compass. So it really is a compass for that specific mineral that you're trying to locate. And I think that one is really interesting because I don't think people think of that one as divination.
But it is. You're predicting where the water is going to be or where the oil.
Based on using the tool.
Water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard it say that way. You're divining water.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that one's really interesting.
So it's funny that you like mention the dowsing rod and divining water and everything, because there's actually a play that I taught back when I was a theater teacher called The Diviners. And it's like an old school, like 1940s play. And it is about a kid who had like seemingly psychic type abilities to be able to, he was like the best at divining for water. And he pretty much saved a town.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
I just had to throw that out
there. And like I said, that one is very well accepted in our, at least in older cultures. I mean, like maybe not so much now because we're not having to go around to find water because we have public waterworks and things like that. The
Farmer's Almanac is kind of telling the future.
Honestly, yes, it is predicting the future.
It is, and often based on moons and seasons and things like that.
Absolutely,
it's another pseudoscience.
Yes, there we go.
Another metaphysical thing.
See, I think a lot of people don't realize that how much of this stuff.
We're all so meta.
Right. We're all
honestly like the old farmers are meta, and you just didn't even know.
It's all ingrained in our cultures and our lore, because. If you really think about it, you're talking about the farmers being meta. They planted by the moon things. And that was how they tracked it. Native Americans did it. The Celts did it. Everybody did it.
Yeah.
So there's that. Okay. So the next one, Kristen kind of touched on the next one, which is psychic development. Now, psychic, that's a broad category as well. And there have been a lot of scientific studies, even by our government.
Yes.
One notable movie about this, I believe it was called Men Who Stare at Goats. Is that what it was called? Yes. And that was a study that was conducted by the U.S. government in an attempt to build psychic ability in soldiers so that they could kill by sight. By sitting and staring at someone, they could kill the goats or whatever. And
the U.S. government also used that same psychic type of theory to spy on the Russians as well.
Yes. So there's all kinds of things that fall into psychic development. And they're usually practices aimed at enhancing psychic abilities like clairvoyance, which is seeing things outside of where you're at. Clairaudience, which is hearing things that you wouldn't normally be able to hear. Or clairsentience, which is the ability to perceive psychic or emotional energy that is not normally detectable through the five senses. So
that's what I mean by not there.
Yes.
You can't see it.
You can't see it. So it's people who can.
It's the sixth sense.
Yes, basically. And that one also, I think would fall with the category of like ghost hunting and things like that. Because in theory, they can sense the presence of whatever. Right. Now, I do know a lot of people who don't believe in ghosts.
They use scientific equipment for ghost hunting as well.
They absolutely do, and they tracked
waves,
EMFs, electromagnetic fields, and thermal imaging, and different things like that. And there are a lot of people who don't believe that exists, but some of those same people also believe in the existence of demons and the devil and things like that.
Or even some believe in time travel. And there's a lot of speculation that that entity that's perceived could be one of any of those.
Right. It could be, And I wondered that too.
Thought.
If when I sense something, if what I'm actually sensing is even myself in the future or in the past at that same point in time.
Right.
And that because scientists already theorize that
you on another
it's a
dimension,
pocket universe.
or me in another,
well, you in a different part of the metaverse,
right? Well, and there are theories about time and space, that time is not this continual line from A to B. It's this crisscrossing ribbon that's all tangled up in a knot.
Oh, for
and there
sure.
are many times when the threads
go
of
through
time,
each other.
they touch each other or whatever, and maybe that's what people sense when they're touching that.
Well, that's totally what deja vu it probably is.
Could be. We don't know. And there's
different things. The Mandela effect.
Yeah, we don't have any way to prove it at this point, so that's what makes it still a metaphysical science. It's a pseudoscience, if you want to. I think that pseudoscience is a rude term, because
that applies that it's fake.
Well, yeah, it implies that it's fake, and it's very dismissive of things that might be able to be proved at some point in the future.
I understand it though, because when you look at the laws of physics, those are proven laws.
Right.
They can be measured with a device. Right. That proves, without a shred of doubt, that it's
if you
fact.
go back to the time when they theorized that the Earth was not flat,
they just didn't have a tool to measure to prove it. That's what
right.
I'm saying.
And so
that's why
you could say that gravity and the Earth being round and the way the solar system works was a pseudoscience. But if you do that,
it was.
Well, it was.
Yeah.
But you're dismissing. It's like, that's why I say the word pseudoscience.
It's kind of rude.
Is rude and dismissive of the possibility that it could be proven in some time.
Well, just think 500 years from now, there will be something else they're calling pseudoscience, and this will be like actual fact.
Yeah.
And we'll be like, can you believe that they used to wear clothes? Or something weird and absurd.
Can you believe that they used to think that there was no psychic ability, and we're all psychic? They're just thinking it and not saying it.
Well, I mean, they have said that there are studies and theories because we only use a certain amount of our brain.
Yes.
Like, what potential could we unlock if we had access?
There's actually a lot of people that argue that too.
Compared to a lot of animals, our brain is really big for the amount of it that we use. So what if the psychic ability is in another part of our brain and we just haven't unlocked it yet? Yeah.
Humans this day and age, maybe they had in the past, but now it's locked up for some reason.
Well, and there are people who believe that we all hold, and this goes back to that ribbon of time that's all tangled up, that we all hold the knowledge of all of our ancestors within us, that it's gone through our DNA, and that we retain everything that was learned before us.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
And that goes
like,
back
especially our past lives as well. We hold the knowledge that we learned in our past lives.
Right. But if you look back at like the Bene Gesserit in the Dune series, they, when they drank the water of life, or, that they were able to see all of the other Bene Gesserit in the line, that they got all of their memories. And so there's theories that could, those could be part of what's in that part of the brain.
Something kind of like that happened in Wheel of Time also.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot of theories about things like that. So, but that, again, like I said, is one of those things. So another one, we're on number 6 here. We have altered states of consciousness practices. So I believe this is talking like shamanism, dream analysis, lucid dreaming, to non-ordinary states, access to non-ordinary states of awareness. So some of this, there are people who practice microdosing or macrodosing of hallucinogens to enter that state of awareness. which is, sometimes the shamanism, that's what they do. They go in a sweat lodge or whatever. Dream analysis, looking at your dreams. There's all kinds of things that are in that realm, and maybe that's part of that same ribbon of time kind of altered. One of the ones that I see frequently used more recently is the salt chamber, the salt water, floating in the salt water. Yes, I can't remember what you call it.
Deprivation.
Yes, sensory deprivation. Because in your, it's like being able to meditate, but on steroids. So you're meditating, you're laying in this salt water, so you float. Right.
Well, and if you think about it, like if you are at a busy intersection and you sit down in the middle of the intersection and try to meditate, it's going to be very difficult because there's things happening and noise,
there's sounds. Yes.
Right. So being in the deprivation chamber allows you to dull those other senses so that they're not receiving as much data, so that your brain can activate.
Yeah. You can't hear anything. You can't see anything because it's dark.
Mm-hmm. Don't smell anything.
You don't smell anything. You're in the water. So all you really, and you're floating. So there's no pressure points on your body. So, and you're not tasting anything, so you're really sensory deprived, and then the only thing that's going on in your brain
is what's inside
your brain. And yeah, I know it's I think it sounds really cool. So that's another one, and like I say, there's
actually 5 different stages of altered states of consciousness. Mm-hmm. So there's pathological, so that's going to be like your consciousness is damaged,
right?
Some way. There's some type of malfunction in your brain, right?
Okay,
so brain damage, epilepsy, those type of things.
Or schizophrenia, maybe,
possibly, yeah. So that is considered a pathological altered state of consciousness, right? It's not a normal state of consciousness,
right?
So we're talking about consciousness is your conscious awareness
of where you
who
are,
what you are, etc. So pharmacological would be psychoactive substances, illicit or prescribed,
right. And there are
natural
some that are
and unnatural.
They used to prescribe LSD for different kinds of treatments.
Well, and you don't even just taking an anti-anxiety medicine
alters your state of consciousness.
Your state of consciousness because you are not hyper fixated on being anxious, right?
Right.
Physical and physiological. So I'll just state some of them, like you said, meditating, fasting, and other activities that humans participate in together that, enliven your senses. To keep it PG. That is considered.
Okay. Well, you can say the word.
I know, that is considered.
We're talking sex.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know if you had to make it.
Sex is not a dirty word.
Okay. I didn't know if you had to change the rating on it, but that is a altered state of consciousness. Interestingly enough.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah, because it's all your nerves.
You're aware of your nerves.
And it's your nerves are just sending signals to your brain. So it's literally your
powerful
brain.
Signals to your brain.
It's your brain just changing. It's and then psychological. Okay, so remember, there's pharmacological, which makes psychoactive reactions.
Right.
But then there's psychological and meditation, hypnosis, music are in that category.
In the psychological.
So, yes. Sorry.
Okay. That
so
makes sense.
Fasting, that one. The reason why that one happens is because you can become delusional.
Yes.
When you're out of food.
Same thing with water. If you don't have any water,
So that's why meditation's actually in the psychological, not the physical.
Right.
And then there's spontaneous, and this one is really interesting because daydreaming is considered one, and near-death experience is also considered.
Yes.
Because in that near-death experience, although sometimes for most it can be a very brief, spontaneous.
Right.
millisecond feeling, and then for others it can be something a little bit more prolonged.
Yeah, because I think probably most people have been in some kind of situation where you like,
even if
say,
it was unrealistic,
you say, my life flashed before my eyes, or I thought I was going to die, or yes, that is an altered state.
Yes,
but then there are also people who are like on the operating table and they see themselves floating over their body.
Yes.
And perceive themselves to having an out of body experience. Yes.
So here's another thought. Those who have like that near death experience, when you have a spontaneous mind shift, just think about that. Like you just had something like traumatic happen to you. It alters your state of consciousness.
Yes, it does.
Sometimes permanently, and sometimes something that's a little bit harder to weed out to get it back to that normal state, like PTSD.
Right. Okay. I see that.
Interesting, huh?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, and that goes back to, some things that John Griffith and I were talking about a couple of episodes back, about our cancer survival, because getting that cancer diagnosis and going through something like that changes the way you think.
Yeah.
It totally changes the way you think. And there are some people who go down the bad rabbit hole and it changes the way they think into a negative way.
Yeah.
But then there are people like John and I who it changed us into better people, because then we had a purpose in our lives, or what, it really categorically changed who we were as people.
Yeah.
And I would assume that would fall into that category, because I believe that has happened to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know, as it comes to like practices, I don't necessarily think there are people who are thrill seekers. Yes.
Well, there are
who
people
bring themselves to like that edge.
Yes.
But
try to get into that, maybe not as a thrill seeker, but as a way to heal themselves, or to see something different.
Right.
Or to be closer to God.
Yeah.
Yes,
in practices, yes.
There are ways that people do that. Yes.
Very interesting stuff.
Yes, I agree. And I never thought of that as a metaphysical practice until I saw it here, but it is, because there are people who try to put themselves into a meditative trance. So that they can be enlightened, or, like I said, make better contact with God, or
receive
whatever.
A message, right?
Right. Yeah. And so there's a lot of different things. And then, like I said, the people using various and assorted chemicals, illicit or otherwise, to reach that same plateau. In the 70s, that was all fun and games, to take LSD or whatever, to achieve that effect. And the government did all kinds of research on doing that. And there's a lot of research into treating PTSD using some of those techniques, to alter their state of being, and to get them into what we would call like a lucid dreaming state, or something where they can control the outcome in that psychological thing, to reverse the damage that was done.
Right, like treating someone with PTSD with a small microdose of ecstasy.
Yes, or something like that. So it's very interesting. And, again, it's still pseudoscience, because we can't read the mind. We don't have a machine that can look in the brain and say quantifiably, this is the thought process when this little synapse is triggered. We don't know. So I think it's very interesting. Okay, so the last category that we're on is healing practices. And this one is also very controversial. There's a lot of, and we've talked about how some of these kind of cross over.
That's why I said they're in a rainbow. They melt into each other. I feel like they're all healing processes. All of them.
Yeah, absolutely. They can all be used as a healing process. But the healing practices are things like therapeutic touch. That would be like massage therapy. That could fall under that Reiki as well, if you're actually having physical touch.
essential oils.
Essential oils.
Yeah.
Crystal healing. Sound therapy aimed at promoting physical and emotional well-being. That would be like singing bowls or listening to a water fountain.
Binaurals, yeah.
Binaural things.
Music.
What do you call the art?
ASMR.
ASMR. Thank you. We've talked about that.
Right.
So there's a lot of things like that are also they fall under that healing practice. I think you could put in there also the acupressure.
Some doctors would consider chiropractic healing as
yes, there are doctors who think it's
science. Yeah, I considered that.
But it's, I could say it's been beneficial to me. So, and
saved my life a few times.
Oh yeah. So there's a lot of things there also. And, oddly enough, I looked through all of these and I think I believe something in each of those categories. It's, the degree to which I subscribe to those ideas is different. Like some of them I believe in wholeheartedly, and then there's others where I believe a few little things in there. But I feel like even though it's metaphysical practices, it's a pseudoscience, whatever you want to call it, I think there's a lot of it that is founded in and grounded in real science. We just haven't really quantified it to the point where it will finally be accepted the way gravity and inertia and things like that are, So I think someday it's very possible that it could be, but for now, that's what it is. So,
yep. One of the things that I was really interested in this list was, and maybe it just falls under healing practices, but there wasn't anything about like herbal nutrition or anything like that.
I think that would be.
I guess it falls under healing practices because when you think about like
medicine and stuff like that.
You have a cold, have some ginger. I guess it falls under the healing practices. But I really was thinking there was gonna be like a separate category just for like,
Right. Well, and when
like
I first started
aromatherapy and
when I first started
healing.
Thinking, imagining what I wanted this episode to be about, I was thinking, okay, we'll talk about tarot and we'll talk about runes and we'll talk about meditation and we'll talk about prayer and we'll talk about Reiki and we'll talk about aromatherapy and we'll talk about herbs and crystals. And I was really more thinking of the leaves on the tree rather
not
than
the roots in the trunk.
Not the roots in the trunk and the big branches. So obviously we've barely touched on these categories. When I pulled up this list, I was like, oh wow, that really encompasses a lot of things. And to break those ideas down further would be.
Well, we have had a few episodes about these characters.
We have
and
had
I think
several.
we have one coming up on crystal healing this year.
Okay.
If and maybe aromatherapy. If not, we should totally do one next year.
Right.
Like we need to do an episode like on the tree leaves, as you're talking about, like different aspects of this. But I'm glad we're doing like this whole quote unquote holistic episode of all of them together.
Yeah. I think it's
that
good because we've talked about oracle cards. We've talked about oracle cards. We've talked about tarot cards. We've talked about palmistry, and we've talked about all different things. I think we need to
just keep the conversation going. So all of this little list kept bringing me back to this little binder. I don't know if you remember it. I lost it somewhere and I wish I could have it back. It was some kind of like subscription thing that I had when I was like in high school and college, and it was called Mind, Body, and Spirit. And they used to send me like this little envelope every like month or whatever, and it had page inserts into this book, and they were in these different categories, and it had all of these different topics that we were talking about, and I was just collecting the pages one at a time.
Right.
And I was thinking about my grimoire too while we were talking about this.
Which we did an episode on also.
Yeah, yes. Because I was like, I have a section on divination, energy work, psychic development. There's a section on the healing practices, because I have a whole bunch of herbs I've written down and like what they're good for, or what a yellow candle is good for, because those are my practices and beliefs. And I've been keeping a lot of information in there, and I hadn't even thought about having mindfulness and meditation. But I am a firm believer that mindfulness is a critical part in all of that, right? Like that's
absolutely.
Why you light the yellow candle, because you're trying to get a specific outcome that you want.
You're using the candle to focus your
energy,
your mindfulness,
energy,
because it all goes back to energy.
Yeah, and I was like, oh wow, that made me think about my grimoire, and I was like, I wonder, if there are some pieces missing in my grimoire that I need to go back and add more things to it, or is that little Mind, Body, and Spirit book. Man, I wish I could find that, but it just made me think of that, and I was like,
maybe
that's
next
really
time
cool.
you move, you can go through everything
right.
one slowly at a little time. Maybe you'll find it.
Right.
But you're so good, because my subscription when I was in high school was dirty romance novels. So.
Those are helpful. Yeah.
Altered state of
helpful.
consciousness.
Yeah.
That's that, what was that? The altered state?
Yeah, when I'm reading a book and I'm in another land and I'm a different person, I am in an altered state of consciousness.
Honestly, though, I mean, that's like an endorphin rush that you get from reading.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you do. Yeah. This has been a really fascinating subject, and I can't wait to, listen to it back again when I edit it, because it's, and I, like you, I think it has changed my look. When we talked about the grimoires, I talked about having a book of light. Mine's a book of light, and it's just things that help me focus my energy in different ways. Just like yours. But I think I like this idea of breaking those things down into major categories and then subcategories within those major categories, because there's obviously some things that I have not even touched on at all. So I really do like the idea of these different categories, and then going on and teaching or sharing more of our thoughts on some of the, like Reiki or
teaching yourself something.
Yeah, why haven't we done an episode on Reiki, especially since it's been over a year since you guys have gotten your certification?
So we're Reiki 1, and I am a firm believer that I am not certified to teach someone else.
No, you cannot teach it.
Well, I'm not talking about teaching it. I'm talking about talking about it.
Right.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Right. I also want to go back and talk about the metaphysics categories, because as you were reading off some of those, I was like, okay, those aren't metaphysical practices like we were thinking, but they were also hot topic categories of discussion.
Physics, of science. Yeah. And
so
we
you got me up that alley. I love that alley.
We love talking about science. So, okay.
Oh, for sure. We should do an episode on cosmology as well.
Right. So next week, I believe Amber is our hostess again. And Amber, what are we talking about next week?
Well, next week we're talking about a discussion that kind of hits close to home, and it kind of goes with the girl wash your face that we did a while back. Is like we're talking about women who are too much, or
and we're using that in quotes, too much.
Yeah,
quote,
like
unquote,
so that's
like
the high unrealistic expectations of women, and that's what we're going to be talking about.
So we all feel like we're too much. So.
Yeah.
Well, or sometimes people tell us that we're too much.
Yeah. So like if you're a woman, which most of our listeners are women, come back next week, especially if somebody has told you in your life that you're too much.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that's it for this week. Don't forget that you can check us out on our website. That is modernmusings.net. From there, you can link to our Heard It on the podcast, where you can get links to the different episodes that we've mentioned today, and I'll also post this list. And then we can, you can also get to our Facebook page and our MMC Chat Facebook chat group. And you can listen to the podcast right there on the website. So go over there to modernmusings.net, and we will see you next week.
Bye. Bye.